Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street was just one of over 150 horror movies released internationally in 1984, many hoping to be the next breakout hit of a slasher craze already on a fast track to this sort of thing.
Garbage day! Huh? No!
But Elm Street's an odd slasher. Its tone and style owe as much to the European art house as the American grindhouse. The film's hypnotic atmosphere and supernatural antagonist bucked the trend and inspired its own brand of imitation. This video's about those movies, so expect many burnt faces, all kinds of sharp fingers, and lots of people waking with a start. Now let's ride that rainbow to dreamland before I have to go get the tickle monster.
Blow it out your ass, Pinhead.
As usual, Oscar kind of points to how intentionally good a movie is, and Tommy to how unintentionally good. As the graph shows, there are fewer movies to choose from than usual, so I'm going to go pretty much chronologically, but I refuse to start with Dreamaniac, so...
Rock and roll!
After dying in a fire that may or may not have been set by aggrieved parents, heavy metal icon Sammy Kerr returns to the physical realm in order to hassle the teenage normies of his hometown. Ragman, also known as Trick or Treat, may not look like much, but I think it's probably a masterpiece. The directorial debut of actor Charles Martin Smith, who, believe it or not, played this guy in The Untouchables and then helmed Air Bud.
Ain't no rules that the dog can't play basketball. This is a joke!
It's a consummate demonstration of quality 80s horror. As well as being well written, well acted and visually inventive, it's blessed with effects that capture Elm Street's playfully surreal spirit for once. And an Ozzy Osbourne cameo I still can't believe is real.
I think they're just out and out sick people. I mean, and they're trying to make everyone else around them who listens to their music as sick as they are.
Oh, cool. Oh, shit. Dreamaniac sells itself as an Elm Street clone, but has no plot, atmosphere, or reason to be. People are in a place, they're all either horrible or doing things like this, and only one of them contributes anything.
Sorry to interrupt, Kissy Face, but where's the phone?
Oh, there isn't one.
That's a joke, right? I mean, what if I have to call my broker?
Like Ragman, it's also meant to be heavy metal themed, but the only evidence of it's a guy in a Def Leppard t-shirt. These people aren't like any metalheads I've ever met. Or any people, actually.
Say, that's a very fetching sweater you're wearing.
It's from Harrods. In England, very expensive.
If Ragman gets the rock horror Dream Demon concept right and Dreamaniac's an indefensible blight on humanity, I guess the law of averages means Slumber Party Massacre 2. Courtney Bates, apparently the younger sister from Part 1, is struggling with terrible nightmares, worse taste in men, and an unreasonable mother.
Sunday's my birthday, and I don't want to go to a mental hospital.
But on the bright side, she and her friends are having a slumber party. Not invited, but present anyway, are horny boys and the reincarnation of the original movie's killer. Courtney's nightmares having physically manifested him in the form of a 1950s greaser.
Now it's time for the fun part.
Who sings.
I love to jam it to the floor, let me twice pipes roar.
Having been inspired by Elm Street, the filmmakers went straight to late-era Freddy. So the killer's nuts, and the second half of the movie's a largely incoherent blizzard of musical numbers, bloody symbolism, and clumsy references.
Come on, Kruger. Denny's is holding our booth.
Quite good fun then. It's much cheaper than you'd expect given the popularity of the first movie, but writer-director Deborah Brock brings something unique to what would probably be just another Jim Wynorski wreck without her. If you squint, you can pretend it's John Waters doing a Rolling Stones rock opera.
I can't get no satisfaction.
As you may have noticed, Elm Street's immediate era of influence coincided with a trend for rock horror movies, which explains why there are so many crossovers, but not why some of them are so weird.
What are you worried about? Just hold the racket out in front of you.
Worried about? If this ball hits these balls, I'm gonna talk like Flipper for the rest of my life.
College-bound Alex Gardner's having terrible nightmares, and unusually for these movies, other people can see them. Sometimes. Sometimes they can't. And other times they're not nightmares because he's awake, and other people may or may not be able to see them. I guess the rules are vague, but the mythology isn't. We're dealing with a demon. Voodoo cannibals, Confederate torturers, an American werewolf in London, and a dead rock star.
That monster that I let loose is indestructible.
And an indestructible monster. Improbably, Alex's college professor's an expert on all of them, but he ignores her in favour of idiotic disbelief until the girlfriend who's too good for him puts her foot down.
Your bed was on fire.
It's a hodgepodge of a movie. In fact, the content's so diverse, there's a third-act montage recapping everything that's just happened, presumably to reassure us we've been watching the same movie all along. The variety probably shouldn't be a surprise, because filmmaker Dimitri Logothetis has had an odd career. After debuting with Slaughterhouse Rock, he directed a documentary on Muhammad Ali, a knockoff Star Wars video game, and a western starring MC Hammer.
Woman, you'd have to be crazier than a dog humping on a rattlesnake.
Yes, I'll find and watch an entire MC Hammer made-for-TV western just in case there's a funny clip I can use to punctuate a line on Dimitri Logothetis. More recently, he reinvented himself as an action movie director and gave us 2020's Jiu-Jitsu, which proved a low point even for Nick Cage.
You see the attention to detail? It's an art. It's a craft.
The following year brought Deadly Dreams, a kind of Silent Night, Deadly Night on Elm Street, which has a lot going for it visually but stands no chance against the casting of Mitchell Anderson.
Oh my god. Oh my god, this is really happening.
You may recognise him from Jaws the Revenge,
cow tipping,
in which he plays the Brody son who gets eaten by the shark in the first 10 minutes. This movie's missing a shark.
He sacrificed a fucking deer in there and he's gonna sacrifice me! Now this is the truth! No!
One of the performances in Night Wars is just as misguided, but the actual movie's an improvement on its reputation, delivering the most explicit example of Dream Demon as metaphor, albeit an ambitious metaphor for the concept of war. Using a horror B-movie to address the realities of PTSD might seem like a bad idea, but it's okay. Director David A. Pryor had a lot of experience making movies about former servicemen finding their return to Civvy Street a challenge. What makes this one so much fun is our hero's solution to their problem. The rules are the same as Elm Street's, but when Nancy brings her demon out of her dreams in order to kill him, these two literally tool up and go in to get theirs. It's an incredible idea because while their dream selves are rampaging through the jungles of Nam, their real selves are asleep at home doing this. Night Wars is all very well, but questionable allegories don't make the most intimidating fake Freddys. Brian James does.
Your worst fucking nightmare, Lucas. I'm it.
The horror show was part of the late 80s electrocuted serial killer returns for vengeance cycle, the most popular example of which is ironically Wes Craven's Shocker, despite it coming a little later and following the same plot.
No more Mr. Nice Guy.
James plays serial killer meat cleaver Max Jenke, the role he considered the best of his career, and it's easy to see why. Writer Leslie Boehm, who co-authored the same year's Elm Street 5, created a B-movie showcase of a character, and James goes at it hammer and tongs.
All I did was give me a hard-on.
Lance Henriksen's overshadowed for once as Detective Lucas McCarthy, the cop who catches Jenke and then becomes the object of his post-mortem gaslighting. He's really put through the ringer, in the first 10 minutes alone coming across a dismemberment, a decapitation, and whatever one of these is called. The gore and related unpleasantness tips director James Isaac's hand as a David Cronenberg protege, having worked on several of the Canadian auteur's 80s and 90s films before graduating to make Jason X. He doesn't do a bad job of recycling Elm Street, but it is a one-trick pony.
I'm gonna tear your world apart. coming back to fuck you up.
Jesus, it's still not quitting time. Got about 20 minutes yet.
Night Terror is a horror anthology featuring 3 morality tales dreamt into being by the nameless inmate of a psychiatric hospital. In the first of them we meet Rick, and for that we must be grateful.
Penis-hating lesbian, if you ask me.
He's the subject of a predictable fable of comeuppance involving a blood-harvesting satanic cult led by a woman in children's fancy dress.
Jesus fucking dykes every goddamn place you go.
The second story features an equally unlikable protagonist on an equally inevitable collision course with ironic death. Only this time he's a property developer who wants to knock down a haunted roller coaster.
Wasn't for guys like me, those historical society morons would preserve every rotting shit pile of wood in the state.
The haunted roller coaster fights back, which is less entertaining than it sounds. The third story looks like it's going to be about a Ted Turner stand-in colorizing classic movies. At least that's the impression created by an opening scene in which we meet our third protagonist, talking to the same guy in the same place and in the same way as our second protagonist was.
So, how does it feel to be the rapist of film history?
Pretty good, considering the money I'm going to make.
But we never see those characters again, and there's no further mention of the subject. Instead, the last segment's a bizarre story about street punks falling foul of big-time drug dealers and deciding the only way out is to hold up a teddy bear store.
Jesus!
Things get out of hand when they kill the proprietor.
Don't hurt my papa!
And wound a bear. This is the stupidest of 3 notably stupid tales. When the stuffed lion kills someone, they shoot it like this. Also, a stuffed lion kills someone. But unlike the other 2, it at least has an ending, and a talking teddy bear.
You shot me through the heart. That wasn't a nice thing to do. And now you'd better watch your ass, 'cause I'm going to kill you.
The original Nightmare on Elm Street is obviously the key to the franchise, but Part 3 has its own imitators. Its psychiatric hospital for teen dream victims offers good bang for your buck with a confined setting and plethora of crazy characters.
Crazy? You said today's secret word.
There are no secrets here.
One of the first to give the setup a spin was writer-director Andrew Fleming, and just in case there's any doubt where he got his idea from, he cast Elm Street 3's Jennifer Rubin in the lead as another institutionalized victim of a tormentor who was burned alive only to return in the subconscious. Once again, Rubin finds herself in group therapy sounding the alarm.
You're not listening to me. You are all gonna die.
If I die, does my mom get a refund?
It's well made, as much a psychological thriller doing something different as a horror, and Rubin's memorable as damaged linchpin Cynthia. The problem's a lack of phony Freddy. They cast Richard Lynch to play a crazy killer burnt in a fire, then covered him in goo and sat him in a corner for 5 minutes.
Fucking crazy people, who knows what they can do?
Yesterday, I promised to tell you about a real case of major league insanity.
Writer-director Jay Wolfall's Beyond Dreams' Door is based on a short he made at Ohio State University 6 years prior, and its cast and crew are drawn largely from the drama department there, which isn't something we need to be told because every student film features this sequence. The Monsters original, though.
This isn't my problem.
A bite could be a kiss as well.
I'm not involved anymore.
The plot's to do with a kid having nightmares that become real, and it's communicated well enough. But the movie's strength lies in the lo-fi artistry of everything. Wolfield and his crew embraced their limited resources, designing an aesthetic that plays to its strengths. It won't look good in context here because it's shot on some kind of video, but it is. It feels like something from before film rather than a cheap version of it.
You can help me stop it.
No, I can't, Ben. I'm already dead.
Beyond Dreams' Door shows it's possible to make a good B-movie on magnetic tape and a budget. Dreamstalker reminds us it doesn't happen often.
Where are you, man?
Brittany Meredith's living the high life as the jet-set girlfriend of Ricky Fries, top dog in the glamorous world of third-tier backwater dirt bike racing. But Ricky's is a dangerous calling. We don't see the accident or its aftermath, but Brittany was clearly there for it all, so it's odd she was also at home and completely unaware of it. Fortunately, we get a scene in which she's told what she just saw that we didn't.
Brittany, something's happened.
Sherry, what's going on? Where's Ricky?
He's dead. No, he can't be dead.
So Ricky's dead, and soon Brittany's driven mad by nightmares of him, or maybe a pizza delivery guy, trying to kill her. And this is where it gets confusing, because at times it seems as if he is. But at other times he's in the real world killing real people he blames for his crash. Not to mention the random urban toughs who live in the forest around Brittany's isolated cabin for some reason. As long as he's killing someone, I suppose. So it doesn't make sense, it obviously looks horrible, but based on the clips you probably think we can at least hear what's happening. The funny thing is, director Christopher Mills went on to be a top-flight audio mixer, but even the score doesn't want to be involved in this soundtrack. Dreamstalker happens fast enough not to be boring and brims with the delusional underdog quality that's so important in these movies. Nobody had any idea what they were doing, but they had a great time doing it, and that enthusiasm comes through in every scene.
Look at those tits!
So far we've only looked at US Elm Street knockoffs, but fake Freddys emerged all over the world, including Mexico, where they were sometimes hard to keep track of.
What's going on? Where is he? John, he's there! Where? Get over here! I can't see! I don't see him! Be careful! Where is he, goddammit?
I'm Johnny.
It's Michael's 17th birthday, and to celebrate, he and his fellow teens hold an impromptu seance and break out a Ouija board. Although never a good idea, this seems particularly unwise when we meet Michael's friends. There's the one who'll get everyone killed.
Hey man, look around. Everything's under control.
The one who'll probably do the killing.
Shut up, everybody!
And the one they'll all ignore.
Maybe he's right. We shouldn't play this game.
Clearly the English language dub's a winner, but the main appeal is the kids.
I just don't know what to do about her, you know? Well, give her a rose. That's right, I'll give her a rose.
The difference between these 25-year-olds, 17-year-olds and most others is these ones act like 12-year-olds. Michael's first date with girlfriend Alexandra is to get ice cream and balloons, after which he gives her a backy home on his BMX. It's indescribably weird, and once he puts on the dinosaur jammies, it only gets weirder. They stay with us for most of the movie, for which I blame the mother.
I have a drinking problem.
I don't know whether Michael's meant to be the cause or an effect.
Don't jump, baby. Come, darling. Please, baby. Give me your hand.
No, Mom.
Come down.
Mom, it's not what you think.
God. Are you okay?
I'm fine, Mom.
Are you all right? You're not hurt?
Yes, Mom.
Oh, baby. Oh, my God.
Trampa Infernal, or Hell's Trap, is a very different Mexican horror in which two feuding youth gangs intend to see who's best by hunting a bear. Instead, they fall prey to a crazed Vietnam vet with a Michael Myers mask, Freddy glove, and Rambo everything else. There's a simplicity that's appealing and a direct filmmaking style that really works with the material. The kids are pretty unlikable though, and it's hard to shake the feeling the guy in the woods just wanted to be left alone. To Italy, sort of, and Night Killer, in which someone wearing a Freddy mask is on a killing spree, and divorcee Melanie Beck knows as well as us she's his next target.
Rika Traskovich is the fourth victim of the hooded psychopath. The woman was also repeatedly raped before being killed.
She survives her encounter, but this is the kind of movie that has its protagonist kidnapped by an unrelated psychopath on her way home from hospital. From there, director Claudio Fragasso tried to develop his film into a profoundly reprehensible psychosexual thriller.
I'm too horny.
While producer Bruno Mattei kept making a crap slasher. Night Night Killer isn't an Elm Street clone, but the bad guys are look-alike, and more importantly, it was made by Claudio Fragasso, who's best known for bearing Troll 2 to full term.
If my father discovers you here, he'd cut off your little nuts and eat them. He can't stand you.
This thing has a similar vibe, thanks to both movies being shot in the US with a largely amateur cast speaking a language the director didn't share, which means both movies are rife with intriguing line readings.
This show sucks. And the rate you're going, Charles, with your head down, I don't know, we might as well, it's never go on. I don't know what to do.
It's hard to laugh at anything so inherently objectionable, though. Axel kidnaps Melanie early on, so she spends most of the movie held hostage, being subjected to physical and psychological torture the director seems to enjoy too much.
While you shoot yourself, try to, I'm gonna eat. Nothing does it to me like fried chicken.
Presumably we're meant to assume Axel's the killer, but when it transpires he isn't, Melanie inexplicably falls in love with him, and Fragasso delivers one of the most troubling happy endings imaginable.
You did everything you did out of love.
I'm gonna kill you, all right. You're dead. Bye-bye, sweetheart.
Don't ever leave me again, Axel.
It's well known Wes Craven conceived A Nightmare on Elm Street after reading a series of newspaper articles about Southeast Asian refugees dying in their sleep. But where did the rest of this mother movie come from, and what have its children stolen? The LA Times gave Craven his core idea, and from there he was particularly influenced by the Gary Wright song Dreamweaver, which he says provided the film's mood. Freddy himself was shaped by childhood memories of a bully and a local oddball who did this. But also a desire to deviate from slasher norms. By giving Freddy a voice, wide-ranging supernatural powers and a sense of humour, Craven created a more flexible screen persona than those of the compelling but limited icons of the day.
Hey, Spinal Tap! Smell this glove!
Robert Englund was only cast after a stuntman was deemed inadequate, and David Warner rejected the role. Englund says his performance was inspired by Jimmy Cagney and Klaus Kinski.
Idiotne, analfabete, mongoloide. Yeah. Idiot, stare, fume la cigarette, pute là, et fais le bruit!
While Freddy's scarred appearance, bladed glove and jovial wisecracking were Craven's further means of making his killer unique, something Englund was crucial to.
It's the guy on the sidewalk frightening the kid, but he also was able to do it in almost a funny way.
Beyond Freddy, Elm Street inspired dozens of horror filmmakers to play with dream states and the subconscious, the difference between reality and fantasy. Craven's film wasn't the first to present our own nightmares as a material threat. It wasn't even the first to do it in 1984.
His only way out is to go back in to the dreamscape.
But it did conjure a unique, woozy atmosphere in which we never know what's real and what isn't, and more importantly, it makes us believe the characters don't either. That trippy vibe is Elm Street's greatest asset, particularly in the wake of Freddy's commercial debasement.
Calling all Dream Warriors. Think you're brave enough to face Freddy? Well, now you can put your nightmare knowledge to the test and win money.
But we can't talk about Elm Street's legacy without mentioning New Line Cinema, the tiny company that was on its knees when owner-producer Bob Shaye scraped together the money to shoot a movie with Wes Craven. New Line became a mini-major known as the house that Freddy built, and would subsequently make classics from Seven to Lord of the Rings to Theodore Rex.
You two have solved this case together.
He's a dinosaur.
He graduated from the academy just like you did.
He's a dinosaur.
You're not a speciesist, are you?
And so to the UK, which you'd never have guessed.
Jenny, if I'm really awake, then don't let me go to sleep again, not until we've worked this out. Promise me.
Dream Demon fuses a lead performance from a Jane Austen adaptation to an almost Repulsion-style new wave sensibility, and then drops Jimmy Nail and Timothy Spall in for colour.
Yeah, how big's his wanger?
His what?
His wanger, his dong, his schlong, his plonker, his mutton cutlets, his pork sword, his beef bayonet.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Who knows whether that should work, but it largely does, and as a horror, Dream Demon delivers more than the requisite brooding tension, visceral terror and gore.
You're a funny man, Mr. Taylor, but I've met funnier.
And so will you.
Funny Man doesn't involve dreams, but the titular demonic jester behaves a lot like late Freddy, and the surreal comedic vibe similar to that of his Elm Streets, as much as it's similar to anything.
Do you like that? Do you like that? I like it. Do you like it? Yeah. Do you like it? Do you like it? Yeah. I like it.
Writer-director Simon Sprackling conceived his debut as straight horror and began filming it that way, but was soon distracted by actor Tim James capering between takes. The two were close friends, and thanks to a series of allegedly highly relaxed inspirations, decided Funny Man should be funny, and midway through production the movie became a comedy.
You can't whack a good bit of family entertainment. No, you can't.
Perhaps surprisingly, I don't get the joke, but I do like the way it makes the violence more disturbing. That's fortunate because there's no plot, just a bunch of people panicking at a demonic jester in the ancestral home of Christopher Lee, who's as out of place in this thing as he was in Police Academy 7.
May I kiss you again? No, you may not.
To begin with, it's just a nuclear family we need to worry about, but Sprackling's determination to keep us on our toes means they're wiped out almost immediately, which is good for two reasons.
Oi, Bobby, Daddy.
What is it, sweetie?
Are you having sexual intercourse?
First, things like that. Second, they're replaced by mystery ink. Sadly, there's no Scooby, but the rest of the gang's here, and they've been updated for the 90s. Most intriguingly, Daphne's now a Jamaican witch doctor, played by Pauline Black, the legendary, to me, singer of British ska band The Selector.
Me, I tell you, boy! Me just kick your evil little ass all the way around the 4th dimension.
Fred's a little more jaded than usual.
Sex and violence, mate.
Shaggy's just the same.
Fuck my ass!
And as usual, Velma's handed the shitty end of the stick.
Duck!
Where?
Stones of Death, also known as Kadacha, is an Australian poltergeist on Elm Street movie in which the teens of a neighbourhood built on an Aboriginal burial ground are menaced by dreams and death because their parents are idiots.
Tell your father what Billy Nudg'll say. I tell him before, but he say I'm silly old black fella.
It's interesting to see a different culture's take on the defiling of an indigenous people's holy land, and the sound design and cinematography are strikingly original. But there's no Freddy surrogate, so we're missing a focal point. The killings instead being carried out by various of Australia's legion of natural perils.
It's either the Loch Ness Monster or the biggest fucking eel I've ever seen in my life.
Moving north to Indonesia, Satan's Bed tapped into Pemali folk horror mythology for its take on Elm Street, which means Freddy's kind of a zombie and has a sidekick. It isn't as wild as director H. Tut Jalil's similarly themed Mystics of Bali, or even his better-known Lady Terminator. There's too much dedication to the source material, which is flagrantly burglarized at every opportunity. But once obligations have been met, Jalil does let his hair down a little. Of course, India's produced a few Elm Street clones, and believe it or not, one of them's underneath this blanket of murky compression. Cooney Murdar was the first fully committed Indian Elm Street clone, but it doesn't want you to know that at first. For ages we're stuck with stalkery killer type Ranjit as he goes about his business, gets captured, goes to court, is confined to an asylum and then breaks out, just in time for us to be introduced to the teens. We're an hour in at this point and still haven't got to the beginning. But the second half delivers a breakneck rush through the highlights of the first 3 Elm Streets. Sometimes scene productions hampered by budget, sometimes by India's Board of Film Certification, which mandated the deathbed blood geyser be more of a squirt. But writer-director Mohan Bakri doesn't let such minor challenges impinge on his desire to tell a story. Mahakal is the better-known Indian Elm Street, and it's probably more fun. Most of the beats are traced, some sequences are virtually shot for shot, and it rather cheekily borrows bits of Charles Bernstein's score. It's 40 minutes longer though, and something has to fill that extra time.
Stop it! I say stop it!
Shame. Aside from Kung Fu, other embellishments include Indian Michael Jackson as a kind of all-purpose 1970s sitcom queen, and of course the song and dance routines. The film was a flop on domestic release, its mix of romance, comedy and horror allegedly confusing audiences, which I find hard to believe. Indian genre fans are hardly adverse to a tonal tsunami, particularly when it's infused with this sort of dramatic intensity.
Watch me point that thing.
The original 976 Evil marked Robert Englund's directorial debut, but Jim Wynorski called the shots in a sequel that owes more to Elm Street, but once again involves a mysterious premium rate phone line from which you don't want to receive a call. There are more changes than similarities, and the most surprising is the fleeting presence of Bridget Nielsen, who lost a bet playing pool with Wynorski and had to pay him off with a cameo.
You're very cute. You kind of remind me of a young Freddy Krueger.
I don't know if George Buck Flower had the same excuse, but you'll never guess what kind of character he plays.
Oh, and Manny, I also want $2 on Beetlebomb the Sixth.
If 976 Evil 2's memorable for anything, other than its terrible title and worse promo art, it's the hallucinatory Night of the Living Dead It's a Wonderful Life scene, in which Girl 2 finds herself zapped into public domain purgatory after flipping between the two movies on TV. Sadly, nothing so odd happens in Hellmaster, which takes place in the kind of elite university where bullies wander the halls armed with whips, and mad professors wander the catacombs armed with inaudible exposition.
Please call me Papa. I want you.
And that's why I had no idea what was going on until I read the synopsis on Wikipedia. It's something to do with John Saxon drugging students, and on occasion it can be surprisingly unnerving. It's easy to forget these movies are meant to be scary because none of them are, but Hellmaster has its moments. This guy's freaky as hell and deserves an enigmatic name like Mind Drencher or Soul Gobbler.
Joey, my monkey man!
Oh. Like a lot of movies around this time, Brainscan's debt to Elm Street is related more to texture than trope. It has Edward Furlong as horror movie fanatic and all-round creepy weirdo Michael Brower, whose latest obsession is a video game that exploits hypnosis and blurs the line between reality and imagination, which inevitably leads its demonic protagonist into our world.
Well, terror's in the doing. It's not watching horror films like some child.
Director John Flynn claimed his teen star had to be slapped awake each morning and even then couldn't act. But more problematic for the movie is the high school principal scarier than the killer.
Why do you watch these films?
I guess it's kind of an escape.
Like watching a pornographic sex film, getting an erection and raping someone? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you know, I don't think erections rape people. People rape people.
You're being a bad boy. I'm gonna have to put you to bed without your supper.
Hey, screw you, you freaking freak.
When a serial killer known as the Sandman is executed for a string of sleep-related murders, he's immediately resurrected via voodoo and goes after the one who got away, Jay Underwood's sand-obsessed reporter Griffin Davis.
The sand, Megan, the sand. Kenny had sand in his eyes.
It's no wonder he's preoccupied with sand, because the movie thinks of little else. There's falling sand, blowing sand, CG sand, quicksand, gravity-defying sand, waves of sand, and swirling sand.
We live in a desert, Griffin. Los Angeles is a desert.
It's not a great movie unless you have a more than casual interest in sand, but there are fun performances from the always unreliable Underwood, and also Lillian Hurst as a homeless woman waiting for the director to shout cut.
He left this place a long time ago. He won't come back. But he put a curse in this place. It's haunted.
I'm not sure Wishmaster is the Elm Street ripoff it's often accused of being, but it does have a similar quality and Robert Englund. Not to mention cameos from half of horror's finest, including another for George Buck Flower as a particularly grumpy George Buck Flower.
I hope you die, you sack of shit. I hope you die, and I hope you float down the gutter so I can fucking piss on you.
Wishmaster, along with A Nightmare on Elm Street, feeds directly into The Wisher, about a troubled teen who has nightmares and so on. Things get worse when she and her friends go to see smash hit slasher The Wisher, and the movie within the movie starts bleeding into the movie. Perhaps because it's the one director Gavin Wilding wanted to make all along.
You got something better to do?
Yeah, you.
Eventually, The Wisher stops talking about horror movies and becomes one, which means we're introduced to a glass-fingered dream demon in time for everything to turn into Scream. B-movies of the early 2000s did a lot of thrashing about in search of an identity, so in a way it's impressive The Wisher has three. First it's A Nightmare on Elm Street, then it's Wishmaster, then it's Scream. Only none of that.
I guess that means a sequel.
I hope not.
When cinema entered its digital age, so did the Elm Street rip-off, obviously. The power of Craven's film and the franchise in general waning over the years, but still potent enough to drive imitations. In Boogeyman 2, the inmates of a teen psych ward are picked off one by one by the Boogeyman, and it's our job to take it seriously. The first Boogeyman was horrendous and everyone hated it. But this sequel's unrelated and actually a pretty effective Elm Street 3 clone. There are some good actors and stomach-churning deaths, plus it's funny every time they say Boogeyman.
You're the one currently being treated for Boogeyman-related delusions, is that correct?
Boogeyman-related delusions. Give the condition a name and it might not sound so silly.
The clinical term is boogiephobia. The clinical term is boogiephobia.
At the same time, and on the other side of the world, Shinya Tsukamoto, the man responsible for the Tetsuo series, was not being funny. He was being horribly disturbing with The Nightmare Detective, a film about people killing themselves in their sleep and a man who can enter dreams. Boogeyman 2 and Nightmare Detective are, for me, the last worthwhile gasps of Elm Street's direct influence. Despite diminishing returns, filmmakers including Wes Craven have continued to trade in freaky nightmares and heavily scarred, unironically behattered dream demons. If we ignore them, maybe they'll go away. It seems unlikely if Elm Street's longevity is anything to go by. With its abundance of sequels, fan films, and extraordinary commercial tendrils, what Elm Street shows us is once the horror community embraces a property, it stays embraced, no matter what it does.
You see, my name is Freddy, and I'm here to say, I'll wrap you up and take my way.
It seems nothing can kill a Nightmare on Elm Street. Not even a Nightmare on Elm Street.
I didn't fucking think so.